Hey, special friends. So, I wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about the shadow self today and a little bit beyond the seventh house and the shadow side because it is found in other places as well. So, the shadow consists of what we are disconnected from within ourselves, what we have repressed, what we don't know that we don't know about ourselves, psychic potentials that we abhor, what we hate, and what we search for in others in order to regain a sense of wholeness. The human psyche exaggerates what we identify with, the light side, what we know ourselves to be in order to balance the dark half, the hidden half, the monster within. So as humans, what happens when we're dealing with the shadow self is we have split an archetype to be both identified with on the one hand, and then we banish the other half to hell. We project the dark half, the disidentified with half, onto others that seem to embody it. We cast the dark split onto others and then say, that's you because it can't be me. I am something opposite and good. I am something opposite and acceptable. We want to fix or destroy or change those who trigger our own shadow. Those who embody our shadow self seem so much of the time to be evil. We want to destroy them. We want to destroy them as they are because we can't tolerate the reminder of what we may be. No single planet or aspect or even house is going to show the complete shadow. It's more complex than that. We can see what we seek to partner with in others through the seventh house. So it's this shadow specific to what we're disconnected from and looking to bring into our life through other people, what we're seeking in other people. Because the seventh house is specific to partnerships and how we view other people through the lens of whatever planets are there or the ruler of the seventh house. Pluto, the planet, though, is going to show what repressed psychological material that we are casting onto others. The eighth house is going to show what planets are operating in the realm of what's hidden. And what we see in others is because of the dark split, often see them as worthy as being cast into hell for. We hate, we detest, we're repulsed by the contents of our own shadow. And we fear it. We fear we will be overtaken by it and do the things we fear in ourselves. What we hate, we will not necessarily do. We just fear that part of our potential. And we must permit our shadow to exist. This is the key. We must see it, acknowledge it, and say, yes, that potential exists in me. It's true. I could go there. That's the insurance that you will not go there. It's the acknowledgement of the shadow, the admission that you have that in you. You have that capability that exists. You could do damage. You could be dangerous. Integration is a product of being honest with ourselves regarding all of our potentials. We have to admit that we can be evil. As a human being, every single one of us has that capability. We have to know that about ourselves. If we cannot admit that, then we cannot have compassion for evil. We will not have compassion for the dark that we see in other people. We can't change what we cannot accept. It will have power over us as long as we do not accept it. As long as it's hidden from our view, as long as we're denying it, the shadow continues to be generated. And it's made up of what we refuse to allow to exist within our own selves. And we have to get really, really honest about what our real motivations are to get down to the bottom of the shadow. It's really just fear that it's made up of. If we can move through that fear, if we can confront it and move through it, not avoid it, not dismiss it or repress it or rename it or bypass it through a spiritual belief that we can build our life around, then we can pop it if we are moving through it. We can use the birth chart to trace back these core beliefs, often the core wounds that constitute and generate the shadow side. We can see how this or that aspect is at work on our perceptions and then use that information as power. We can unravel the birth chart to reveal who we are underneath our beliefs about our wounds. And this leads to the truth about who we are. It can show us how we can allow our more authentic selves to do the driving rather than those core wounds. We start acting rather than reacting in the world. And when we do this shadow work, when we acknowledge the entirety of ourselves, we begin to see the world can be a safe place, that relationships and other people can be safe. We don't have problems with other people. We can laugh at other people's weirdness rather than trying to destroy it and them. And when we do our shadow work, we can find that we don't feel battered about by the reactions and the choices and the decisions of other people. We are free to be as we are. And so they are also granted the freedom to be as they are. We must do the inner work that brings that split archetype within ourself to wholeness, to healing, to completion of an evolutionary cycle. When we do our shadow work, we're not triggered as we once were. We are able to see others objectively rather than seeing others subjectively, that is, through the lens of ourself. And this makes for a much more meditative life. We also find that we don't participate in group thinking. We aren't able to be used by others for their purposes because we don't have an agenda that someone else can subvert. We find liberation from those own internal chains when we do shadow work, when we bring that split archetype to wholeness. We find freedom from the judgments and the fears that resulted in viewing life and symbols and people and events as they were not. We no longer interpret the world through the agenda of our light side or our shadow side. We see things in their entirety. And a good start to making the acquaintance of the shadow self is to look at your 7th house, Pluto aspects to any planets, and the 8th house, the ruler of the 8th house. This is a good place to start, but again, we can have any planet, a combination, be split. But just looking at Pluto aspects 8th house contents, 7th house contents. That's a good place to start when it comes to identifying the darker half. And it'll show you a good slice of what has not been made completely conscious, what archetypes we've split and then now are operating under the belief that that split results in. The birth chart is simply a map of the psyche. We turn it inside out and it becomes the world that we participate in. The horoscope shows what we see in the world, how our perceptions and beliefs result in the experiences we're going to have, how successful or not we're going to be when it comes to getting our needs met. When we can understand what we think, both consciously and unconsciously, what our filter looks like, that's the birth chart, we can then choose to step into that perception, choose to wear the mask of personality, of identity, or not. We can also choose to not see things, symbols, and people through that filter of the birth chart. And we can understand that our personal view is not necessarily the truth. Looking at it through the birth chart is not necessarily the truth of what we're seeing. It can get us closer to what the truth actually is as we widen out of that view. As we learn that that view is only based on our position largely as a developing human being, as a child. And we can change that position. We can choose a different viewpoint. Until we've seen through those beliefs, though, we have no chance of changing those beliefs or dropping those beliefs because we are at the mercy of them. Use your chart to get to the bottom of your worldview. It will allow you to expand it, to release yourself from limitations, fears, paranoias, isolation, anger, expectations, and false ideals. You can stop seeking for more. Stop the search for a savior or a perfect other. You are as you are, and releasing ourselves from our fears of our own selves is the key to peace. We all need to wake up. We all need to realize our divinity and our wholeness. When we can accept that we are the source of our own fears, we can move through that and find peace and be the source of our own peace. So I hope this brought another layer of understanding to what the shadow is all about, and I will continue hammering away at this subject as time goes by.